Welcome to This Week in Local, a Localogy podcast featuring lively conversations about the local digital ecosystem, hosted by Localogy analysts Mike Boland and Charles Laughlin.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to This Week in Local. I'm Charles Laughlin, your co-host, joined by Mike Boland, your other co-host. Mike, how's it going?
Hi, Charlie.
So, Mike, what are you working on?
So this week we're going to go back to the AI trough. Of course, there's so much going on there, very hot topic. So this week or late last week, there is a new AI integration from a tech giant that to me is actually one of the most logical integrations we've seen so far. So we've seen, high profile integrations, Microsoft with their sort of chat GPT integration into Bing. You have Google with Bard and all these other ones. But the company I'm talking about here, where it even makes more sense to me, is Adobe. And I'll get into the reasons why in a second. But essentially what Adobe has done is they have launched this tool called Firefly that integrates with the Creative Cloud. And like a lot of other generative AI tools, it is it's software that allows you to generate image or graphical assets based on keyword prompts, similar to DALL-E 2 and Midjourney and these other ones that are getting a lot of attention. So for example, someone that is a graphic designer or a digital artist of some sort, the typical Creative Cloud customer, what they can do is they can use this for a few reasons. One is inspiration, right? Just sort of generate images based on just words, just to sort of, storyboard what they're going to do before they do it. It's a great inspirational tool that a lot of artists have used. That's one actual generative AI use case we haven't spent a lot of time talking about. But also in the just sort of workflow of everything from like Photoshop to Illustrator to all these Creative Cloud platforms, apps within the platform, it allows them to just sort of like streamline and automate some of the things that they do. So it still requires like a deft artist's hand, but it allows them to sort of cut corners where there's like graphical elements within some, say they're just working on a mural or just whatever the sort of artistic endeavor is for like background images and here and there and just things that are the sort of ingredients of what they're working on. They can streamline some of that through like a generative AI process. Now, getting back to why this makes a lot of sense for Adobe. One, the Creative Cloud is just so ubiquitous. I mean, it's like the go-to platform for digital artists, graphic designers, and others. And again, that's everything from Photoshop to Illustrator to InDesign and Premiere and all of these different formats. So it's sort of a nice home for generative AI, and not just what it adds for Adobe in the value proposition to its users, but for AI, for the medium of AI and its sort of like traction and adoption. This is the best thing it could ask for in terms of just being sort of delivered to like millions of artists and Creative Cloud users through the sort of familiar vessel that they have. Now, Firefly at first will be sort of its standalone app within that Creative Cloud suite, but eventually, and apparently it's not going to take too long, they're actually going to integrate it across all of these programs. So right within that workflow, you can just sort of call up that generative AI sort of widget within, all these programs, just to sort of use it in the ways that I mentioned. Now, another thing I'll say that makes it sort of logical for Adobe is that it's sitting on the sort of the ingredients, the AI training sets that's going to enable it to pull this off, I think, in a very effective way. We've talked in the past about how Google, even though it's gotten a lot of flack for its sort of, late coming AI moves, it's really well positioned because it has something like Google Images, which is like 20 plus years of like all the world's images that have a taxonomy and keywords attached to them and alt tags. And that's all just like exactly what you need for an AI training set. Adobe has that too in Adobe Stock. They have their just pervasive stock image library that has each image associated with tags and keywords and things like that. So they're going to be able to actually be quite effective in this integration. And then the last thing I'll say is that aside Adobe Firefly, which is this announcement, they launched a sort of version of it that's called Sensei. And what that's going to do is bring everything I just mentioned into the Experience Cloud, which is Adobe's sort of version of the Creative Cloud for marketers. So picture all those things, but instead of like replace the word wherever I said digital artist or graphic designer, brand marketing exec or associate. And what they can do is use this for the creation of email marketing campaigns or banner ad campaigns. And it comes with the additional benefit of sort of a conversational AI component for like generating marketing copy or saving time by creating different versions of a campaign for email and banner ads or different target audiences and working on things like tone of voice and those things that, conversational AI as opposed to generative AI is doing really well these days. So a lot going on there. But again, I think it's going to accelerate the adoption of AI and bringing it back to SMBs, our sort of perennial topic. I think it's going to ease that transition for SMBs that are sort of part of the creator economy or any sort of marketing folks in the SMB world who use the Creative Cloud. This is sort of their training wheels into all of this sort of AI stuff. So we're going to watch to see how that plays out, but that's what we're looking at for now.
Great. So when you said Sensei, I almost blurted out, "Howdy, your Sensei," because the whole
Right.
Napoleon Dynamite line. But I figured,
of course,
those who got it would think it was funny. Everyone else would think I was just being a little crazy.
Rex Kwon Do was the character, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. Okay, you said something earlier, like embedding this into Adobe Cloud is like an accelerant for adoption. And the thought that popped into my head when you said that, if I got you right, was, does it need one? This stuff seems to be just taking off on its own quite well. Does
True.
AI need an accelerant for adoption? I mean, is that really even an issue or is it about the right adoption of it in the right use case, or what? Yeah.
Right use cases and right people in terms of scaling. So right now, everyone that's geeking out about AI and it's getting so much buzz, of course, are just sort of, it's the Silicon Valley effect. It's the tech people that are getting excited about it. But when you think about, average folks, again, SMBs, a lot of the persona I mentioned, the graphic designers of the world, they're pretty savvy, right? I mean, they're in the tech world, reading tech news. So they probably don't need an accelerant, but there's a certain segment of the Creative Cloud users, Experience Cloud users, brand marketers, folks that just aren't as in tune with or maybe they heard about it. Everyone's like reading articles. It's got to the point of like New York Times articles and mainstream publications, but in terms of actually using it as a tool in your job or in your day-to-day life, I think that's different. So that aspect, I think accelerating that actual use and okay, now I see the value, I'm using it every day. That level of engagement, I think, could use some acceleration.
Okay, that's fair. Where do you think this is going? Because when I'm, the wheels in my head are turning and it's saying sooner or later there's going to be a creative suite, probably Adobe's, but who knows, where you can basically just create, audio, video, motion with all generative AI in one suite. Just give it an idea and you've got your YouTube video. You think that's where it's going?
Yeah, I think this is eventually going to be integrated into kind of standalone tools in all of these functional areas. So the beauty of the Creative Cloud is that it has all of those. You mentioned video. I mean, Adobe has Premiere, which is its answer to like Final Cut Pro. Now, Final Cut Pro, which is an Apple product, will probably be integrating. I mean, Apple's never first out of the gate with anything. They perfect things. And
they like it to be best rather than first.
Yeah. So that's what I assume is going to happen with Final Cut Pro. But you have other standalone tools out there. Canva comes to mind. Right. Canva. I think I could be wrong. I think they've already started to integrate some.
I can't imagine it will take long if they haven't done it already.
Yeah. But you bring up a good point in that this will be pervasive. It'll be table stakes. And whether it's this monolithic Creative Cloud or just some of these standalone tools, I think it's going to become like a competitive necessity pretty soon for all sort of creation of anything, whether it be video or podcast. Podcasts will be interesting in an audio format. I'm not sure how that'll translate yet.
Well, there's audio. I mean, you could do that now, I think. I believe you can. Okay. Yeah. anyone's welcome to correct me on that, but I've heard some audio AI.
Yeah.
I don't
There's
know if it
voice
could create an,
emulation.
yeah, yeah. I don't know if we could create an hour-long podcast that anyone would listen to just yet, but I can't imagine that's far off. And
Yeah. So actually, now that I think about it, there's voice emulation, and then you can type in the text and it'll say it. So
right,
Donny
that,
O'Sullivan, the CNN reporter, actually did a very interesting segment where he called his parents and tricked them into like him talking, but he was just typing.
but
And
he
he's
was
going
still,
on a full
the thought
conversation.
process was still his.
Yeah, yeah, and the full
I'm
conversation
just saying,
was his.
inventing the conversation through AI.
Yeah,
That would be
but what he was
podcasting being
demonstrating.
disintermediated by. Okay, I'm sorry. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
what he was demonstrating is I'm doing this now. I'm the one typing the text and it's coming out in my voice, having a conversation with my dad, and I'm fooling him. But the implication is that means someone else could do that. Like I'm the one doing the
Exactly.
typing, but someone else could
It's like, yeah,
with
it's in
this
the same vein
technology.
as the deepfake, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's an audio deepfake.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, fair enough. So, Mike, why don't we take a quick pause for a little break?
Hi everyone, it's Mike Boland, Senior Analyst at Localogy, here to tell you about L23. It's our annual flagship event, held this year in sunny San Diego, Coronado Bay to be exact, and it's all about charting the course of local commerce and tackling all of the factors and topics that continue to impact the business of local media, advertising, and commerce. So we've got a solid speaker lineup already, and we'd love to see you in Coronado Bay, April 17th through 19th, and you can find out more at localogy.com. Now back to our episode.
Okay, we're back. So, Mike, I actually haven't finished writing this yet. It's something I'm working on. As you know, I like to write about buy now, pay later, write snarky things about buy now, pay later. The model where you get a pair of shoes and you pay 25% down and the remaining payments over, say, 6 weeks or something like that. There's a bunch of platforms out there doing it. Well, Apple is in the game now. Now, last year, I forget exactly when last year, I think it was last year, we wrote a couple pieces about Apple signaling that it will come out with Apple Pay Later sometime down the road. I think it was a partnership partnering with Goldman Sachs to fund it, basically, because buy now, pay later requires a big pile of cash to fund purchases and so on. But anyway, Apple has announced, I think it was this week, they announced that Apple Pay Later is being introduced on a limited basis by invitation to Apple users, Apple Wallet users, and it's basically integrated into the Apple Wallet. So once somebody does use Apple Pay Later to buy a pair of shoes, a dress, something electronic, maybe airplane tickets, I don't know, all the various things people use BNPL commonly for now, can be done, but it has to be done through the iPhone. So this raises a bunch of questions. One, why this slow roll? That's one question. Two, why at all? Because buy now, pay later as I've written many times on Localogy Insider, Localogy's online publication that we both contribute to, that buy now, pay later has become rather toxic. In fact, last week I was writing about Klarna introducing ChatGPT into its platform, basically to give shopping recommendations. And and part of that write-up was the way that they're changing the language they use to describe themselves. That's always, in my mind, a signal that somebody realizes they have a PR problem when they try to change the language. And the BNPL industry is trying to change the language, referring to themselves as we're an online bank or, something like that. And instead of we're a buy now, pay later platform, which is what you are. So Apple is wading into a toxic pool in some ways, one that is still popular, don't get me wrong, but it has a lot of PR downsides. So I just think it's interesting that Apple's in this game at all. I mean, they're in the payments game, so it makes sense from that perspective, makes sense from other perspectives, but I think from my optics PR perspective, it's problematic. And I'm wondering what you think, Mike.
Yeah. So what I see Apple doing here is, or the why to answer your question, is the same reason it really does anything, which is a means to an end. And that end is its core business, which is selling hardware, selling more iPhones, locking you into its ecosystem where your, ARPU as the customer goes up because you own,
Right.
an iPad, a watch, and AirPods and your iPhone. And the way it does that, if you think about like a lot of its apps, It doesn't make money on Google Maps, although it's starting to become the tip of the spear for some advertising revenue as Apple wants to, diversify its revenue because the hardware, especially smartphones, which is the cash cow, is reaching global saturation and maturity as a product. So it's doing a lot of diversification. But with that aside, most of the things it does are to get you to buy an iPhone as opposed to going out and buying a Samsung phone and operating in the Android world. The more things it has that are attractive sort of carrots within that ecosystem sort of boosts that buyer decision to buy an iPhone instead of another phone. So that includes, Apple TV Plus and all these things that are just sort of like endemic to its ecosystem. And I see buy now, pay later as simply being another checkbox in that value proposition. And, as you noted, it ties into Apple Wallet. So it has some sort of stickiness to it and switching costs because, you tie it to your credit card, you tie it to your wallet. And, it's just another incentive to sort of, get on board the Apple train.
Yeah. I mean, and also, through the Apple Wallet, you can track, your progress toward paying the loan off and the outstanding. And they do refer to it as a loan, which I think is important and interesting.
And it comes with that Apple signature elegance, just the UX, the design. It's probably a better user experience than like some of those other products. And I think one thing in support of that theory there is that why else would they be doing it? As you noted, like that's a business model that has been sort of beholden to, fluctuations in interest rates and other things that just have made it like it's just squeezed the margin. So it's not getting into it for like the actual, the business model.
I'm not sure they're going to make money. I don't know that offhand. I'm not sure.
So
that
it's a means to an end.
A moneymaker unto itself.
It's a loss leader.
My other thought was, is it a loss leader for Apple Pay? Apple as a fintech operation, Apple as a payments company, is it part of expanding that versus selling more iPhones?
And that goes into the bucket of that revenue diversification. Right. I mean, like I said, the iPhone, which is its cash cow, continues to face sort of revenue deceleration every quarter because of just global saturation of smartphones. And that's just not Apple.
The law of large numbers, as we've talked about before.
Yeah. So they're just trying to diversify. And that is exactly why they're getting into entertainment. There's a lot of rumors about them getting into cars. I mean, they're looking for ways to counterbalance those revenue declines in other places, and fintech is probably one of them. So forget what I said about selling more iPhones, although that's probably there too. It could be to just boost one of those alternative revenue streams through fintech. And this is just a component of that.
I mean, I felt more like it was that than, I think the sell more iPhones thing it's stock and trade for them, right? That's their MO. And it might be they may be thinking, they may have drawn a few vectors on the whiteboard for this thing. But that said, interesting you mentioned the car. I've been wondering why they haven't done that already, because I know it's widely rumored. I forget if there's been prototypes spotted or whatever, but my girlfriend is a Tesla driver. And I often, when we're driving around, I often say, this thing is just an iPad on wheels, It feels, it's solid state, purely electronic, operated basically through a giant iPad on the dashboard,
Yeah.
And so it's like
gets over-the-air updates.
Yeah, Apple should be doing this because it's already in this business. It's just doesn't put wheels on it yet. Just put wheels, make an iPad much, much bigger, give it a huge battery, put wheels on it. There you go. You've that's
we see other evidence of that. Yeah. We see other evidence of that, like needing to diversify revenues. And when you're so big, and that's the law of large numbers you cite, when you're so big, it has to be something large enough to move the needle. So you see these massive verticals that tech giants go after. So that would be Apple's justification in cars. That's Amazon's justification in like buying One Medical and all of a sudden.
Or healthcare. I was about to say healthcare. Healthcare is one of the few things big enough to get an Amazon interested. That's a Scott Galloway talking point. Over and over again, maybe not so much recently, but he's hammered that point home, which is they have to get into a different business. The only thing out there big enough is maybe education and healthcare.
It's got to be big enough to move the needle on the revenue growth. Now, bringing that back to Apple, that supports your point in like fintech is a large area for Apple to diversify into.
It has the scale. It has the scale.
Yeah, it has the scale. And this could be the Apple Pay Later, just a component of just building that pyramid.
Okay. Okay, Mike. So before we sign off, I just want to bring up something else I wrote. I think last week or it was earlier this week. I lose track of time, and it was about a company called Weight Room, basically relaunching its online meeting platform. Basically, that does online meetings. It's kind of a Zoom competitor now, and they relaunched it. It started out kind of as an influencer one-on-one platform that I think there's a company out now called Info or I forgot. No, I forgot. There's an app I keep seeing ads for. It's either Intro or Info or something where you can basically do one-on-ones with entrepreneurs to talk to them about your business idea. And I think Weight Room kind of started out as something a little bit like that, and they kind of realized that the bigger opportunity is sort of in the enterprise online meeting space, kind of taking what Zoom does and making it better, And the entrepreneur behind it is someone named Vinny Lingham, who is, if people don't know who he is, you probably know some of the companies he started. He launched Yola years ago, exited that a long time ago. Yola is a freemium website builder. Was in an online loyalty rewards thing called Gift. Big crypto guy, Civic Technologies, which kind of sparked the idea of blockchain as an identity management platform, or building that on blockchain.
So he's been Shark Tank.
Yeah, and he's Shark Tank South Africa.
The South African Shark Tank. He's a shark.
He's a native South African. But he actually lives in California, and he's one of the sharks in South Africa Shark Tank. So, and he's, kind of famous for that. So anyway, he's going to be speaking at the conference. He just did a relaunch of his product, which I wrote about. I just kind of wanted to mention that since it's something I wrote about recently. And since it also brings up a really interesting entrepreneurial thought leader that we're going to have at the conference. So probably a good spot to end it on. Mike, anything else?
Nope.
But then why don't you read us out?
Sure. So thanks everyone for listening. This has been This Week in Local. The episode was brought to you by L23. That's the conference Charlie just referenced. Localogy's flagship event taking place this year in San Diego, April 17th through 19th. So that's coming up fast. You can find out more at localogy.com, and stay tuned every week for more episodes of This Week in Local. You can find the show on all major podcast networks. Please subscribe, like, and comment. So I'm Mike Boland with Charles Laughlin. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Localogy's This Week in Local with Mike Boland and Charles Laughlin. Be sure to subscribe for more.